Morning, everyone coming in. We're just going to give it a minute or two. There's quite a lot of people signed up for this morning's session, so we'll let them in and then we will start this morning's session. Can I get a thumbs up that people can see the share screen at this point? Beauty, thank you. All those thumbs. I'll give it one more minute, Amita, if that's okay.
Yeah, it sounds good. We're still waiting for one guest, anyone.
All right, I think we might make a start. So I'm going to do a brief, very brief introduction to kick the session off as we've got people coming in, our panel presenters obviously, and others joining us progressively throughout the hour, I'm assuming. So I'll take charge of that. So good morning, everybody, and welcome to another Teaching Academy PD event. This morning, we're lucky enough to have an expert panel of practitioners that have been involved in working with interactive orals, and that work has been ongoing for quite some time at Charles Sturt now. We're talking years into that practice. So we have quite a lot of experience and expertise, both within the uni and also the networks, communities, etc., that have been developed throughout that time. So today's session, Beyond the Written Word, Exploring the Power of Interactive Oral Assessments, will involve questions going to that expert panel. I will be basically keeping people's microphones and things muted until we get to parts where we're having questions and other things going on. But before we actually begin the session today, I would like to start with an acknowledgement of country. So we respectfully acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of the lands on which we live and work together. Charles Sturt University and its staff pay respects to elders within First Nations communities and acknowledge the continuity of cultures, languages, leadership and knowledge systems. We acknowledge First Nations people's continuous connection to country, recognising the unique, diverse identities and cultures of peoples in our communities, regions and nation. As such, we value the collaboration to strongly position First Nations people in our university, peoples I should say, through languages, leadership, cultures, knowledges, research and ceremonies. Please feel free this morning to share the country that you're joining in from in the chat as well. And I'm coming to you from Wiradjuri, beautiful Wiradjuri land today in the shadow of Walu, just as we are beset by people coming for race weeks, month, I'm not sure at this stage. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen there and hand over to Amita Crowdlower, who will be guiding you through this morning's session. Thank you, Amita.
Thanks, Lachlan, and thanks everyone for joining us today for this panel session on interactive oral assessments, or IOAs in short. Before I launch into it, just a few things to keep in mind. You have ability to ask questions at the end. You can come off mute, but there is a QA panel there, so you feel free to post questions as and when you feel comfortable. As you've seen in the information about the session, we are expecting a guest speaker as well. Unfortunately, he's been caught in traffic, so I'm hoping he'll join us soon. Yeah, and looking forward to this conversation. So I might as well get started. So, well, thanks for everybody's interest in this topic, and it's very topical at the moment with Texas' growing emphasis on assurance of learning, particularly in response to the challenges posed by generative AI tools. As we know, the sector is shifting towards supervised assessment format. So in today's session, we've designed it to explore one such approach, a supervised assessment that is innovative, inclusive, and promotes academic integrity, the IOAs. So in an era shaped by AI technologies like ChatGPT, DALL-E, and voice cloning tools such as 11 Labs, IOAs offer a timely and robust way to verify student work. Professor Danny Liu has identified IOAs as a type of secure lane one assessment, and Dr. Philip Dawson's anti-cheating approaches tier table places them at level A of his Swiss cheese model, just below programmatic assessments, highlighting their strength in mitigating academic integrity risks. It is pleasing that Charles Sturt University has been an active player in this space. From 2021 to 2023, we supported the implementation of IOAs across a wide range of subjects and disciplines. We also conducted a research to gather feedback from both academics and students of their experiences of IOAs. Recently, we published a paper where we proposed that IOAs actually bridge both lane 1 and lane 2 assessment purposes. And that is while IOAs are summative and provide assurance of learning, they also serve a formative purpose, supporting assessment of learning, as learning and assessment for learning. So while IOAs are widely implemented across universities in Australia and internationally, there are still many questions and areas of uncertainty, particularly around the design, implementation, and scaling up for large cohorts. I have also noticed some confusion around terminology where any assessment involving a verbal component is being labeled as an interactive oral. So to address these questions and clarify best practices, we are privileged to hear from a diverse panel of educators who have implemented IOAs across a range of disciplines. They'll share their experiences, insights, and practical strategies for navigating both the opportunities and challenges of this assessment format. So I think we are still waiting for the guest speaker, so I'll hold off introducing him.
Praneeth is here. Sorry, Amita. He
Oh,
has
good.
joined us. Yep.
Oh, good. Excellent. So we are especially honored to welcome our guest speaker, Dr. Praneeth Anand from the University of New South Wales. Praneeth is a senior lecturer in the School of Information Systems and Technology Management in the UNSW Business School. He currently teaches various networking and cybersecurity courses. He is passionate about student engagement and success and recognizes the important role assessments play towards this. Praneeth recognizes the diversity that exists in contemporary classrooms and attempts to design assessments that are meaningful, transferable, and flexible, enabling all students to have best chance at success. Welcome, Praneeth. And joining him on the panel, Dr. Belinda Downey, lecturer in early childhood education in the Faculty of Arts and Education. Belinda has extensive experience teaching and leading in the early childhood profession, with her research focused on retention and early childhood educators. Belinda and her subject team on the success of implementation of their IOAs were actually awarded a second place in the 2024 Regional University Network Award for their entry, boosting retention through equitable assessment in early childhood education. Welcome, Belinda. We also have Dane Rickwood joining the panel. He is a scholarly teaching fellow in paramedicine in the Faculty of Science and Health. His educational practice centers on fostering professional communication and interpersonal skills. Dane has integrated interactive oral into paramedicine education, resulting in improved alignment between learning and assessment, enhanced academic integrity, and supported equitable access for regional and remote students. Welcome, Dane. And finally, we have Dr. John Gaffey, who is a senior lecturer in criminology in the Center for Law and Justice from the Faculty of Business, Justice, and Behavioral Sciences. John has been working in tertiary education since 2002, delivering and leading a variety of criminology and sociology topics at Western Sydney University and Charleston. At Charleston, John was also Justice Studies Discipline Lead for the Bachelor of Criminal Justice and Bachelor of Policing and Public Safety programs. He's also served as the Justice Studies Course Director over, multiple sessions. So welcome to all our panelists. And let's now dive into the conversation and explore how IOAs can transfer assessment in higher education. So to begin with, I am going to direct individual questions to the panelists to bring out their context of teaching and the situation which they implemented the interactive orals. And then we'll have some common questions. And again, feel free to respond to each one, or if you want to pass, that's perfectly fine as well. So I'll start with Praneeth. Praneeth, you were the first academic at UNSW to implement an IOA in your Masters of IT program. I know you implemented this along with your industry partner. So what I'd like to know is, could you share with us your reasons for introducing it in the first place, and how did you bring your industry partner on board? Can't hear you. Can't hear you.
Hold on. What about now? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Excellent.
Pardon me. I know Amita is very organized and she asked me to join a little bit early, and I wouldn't expect anything less from Amita, but my light trail in Sydney, if you have lived in Sydney, you would know how things, when you're running late, they tend to run late as well. So thank you, first of all, for inviting me to join this conversation. I know there's an absolutely amazing group of people online and the panelists as well. Before I start, I must first of all acknowledge that when I embarked on this journey, the first people that I reached out to was folks in Charles Sturt University to help me set up the interactive oral assessments, Amita and a couple of her colleagues as well. I had attended a presentation that she did a little while ago, and the whole concept of interactive oral I found it quite engaging for me, and I could see how it would be very engaging for my students as well. I started thinking about putting authentic assessments in my courses just when I joined UNSW, probably, well, I was thinking about doing that about 2023 or thereabouts kind of thing, just before or just about when AI and ChatGPT was about to come and disrupt everything that we're doing. But so even before that, I wanted to bring in authenticity in my assessment. So yes, academic integrity and stuff like that was very important for me, but more important than that for me was the authentic assessment element of that. And I was fortunate to have had the chance to design two brand new postgraduate courses at that time. So I embedded interactive oral assessments within my courses. And because I teach industry aligned courses, I had an industry partner who was teaching with me as well. So some of the stuff just sort of evolved organically for me, and all the pieces just sort of came together. So I had an industry partner teaching with me, and when I presented these assessments to him, Matt O'Kane, he absolutely loved it. I said, well, this is what we do when we recruit people. And I thought, oh, this is fantastic, because I could learn from him how to design those authentic interview questions. So we sat down, we designed the authentic interview questions, and I followed the examples that Charles Sturt University uses with, I think, John and Amita and a couple of other people. We had some recordings done. So I followed that approach, and I did some recordings with my industry partner to create those exemplar videos. I redesigned all the other assessments, learning activities, to sort of bring a lot of the conversational elements into my teaching and learning. activities as well. So the industry partner bit came about a little bit organically, but I think it was just the right moment for all of that to come together. But a little while later, once I've tried it a couple of times, couple of terms at UNSW, I actually then applied for an ethics application. I got a grant and I did an evaluation with the students. But more importantly for me was to also see what my employer groups were thinking about this form of assessment as well. So I brought together a focus group, a couple of focus group of employer groups, and we sat down and we explained this is what we do as far as assessments is concerned. What do you think about it? And the response has been overwhelmingly positive from the employer groups. Obviously, there was some suggestions as you would expect in terms of diversity in assessment styles and things like that. But the employer groups absolutely loved it. They found that to be a much better way of assessing students rather than the traditional written exams that many of us were used to. So in a nutshell, that's basically what I did. Now, whether I was the first person at UNSW, I'm not very sure, Amita, because there's pockets of things happening around the place. Universities tend to become too big for their own good, and people go off and do things. So I don't know, some people call them Vivas or whatever, but I think terminology is very, very important. It's not a Viva, it's an interactive conversation, and that's what I like to stick to. So there we go. I hope I answered that question, Amita.
Yeah, absolutely excellent. And actually, you also gave us that insight of where we can take our work next, because once you have implemented it within your classroom, bringing your industry partners or employers on board as well, I think that's a fantastic way of validating what we're doing and, adding value as well to our students and, employers as well. So excellent. Thanks a lot for that. Well, next question, Belinda, I'm moving on to you. So in your situation, I'm aware that your early childhood cohort is quite unique because you have students coming, transitioning from vocational education and training into university. So they're pretty different from some of the other cohorts in other subjects. So what inspired you to consider IOAs for this cohort? And especially considering, because yours was a very large cohort. So for everybody's information, Belinda's cohort was 225 students. Thus far, the largest cohort who have implemented IOAs at Charleston. So Belinda, over to you.
Yeah, so thanks, Amita. So we were looking at, so the retention team was working with two of the first year subjects in the Birth to 5 degree. And it, like you said, they've got to have they come from a vet background. They must have a diploma of early childhood education before they can come into the bachelor. So many of them are either used to that TAFE, vet model of face-to-face and really recognise prior learning, really practical skills. And then for many of our students, they haven't studied for 6 years. A lot of them haven't written essays. So we have a lot of support for academic skills for those students because they can struggle. The cohort itself is notorious for misconduct, unfortunately, because they're mature age, they're working, majority of them have caring responsibilities, and as we know, they tend to get a bit stressed and desperate, and so they do things that they wouldn't ordinarily do. But our cohort was notorious for academic misconduct, typically plagiarism, where they'd borrow other people's assessments and copy them, but we also had cases of contract cheating and things like that as well. So this was sort of last year. We were looking at redoing the subject in order to support retention of the students. We have a lot of English as an additional language students as well. And so not only do they have difficulty writing the essays, but also often the grammar and the tense and everything can be a bit difficult as well. And so as the first subject, it's the first subject in the course, and we really wanted to help boost that retention and give them the confidence to continue. teach them the skills that they needed, the academic skills that they needed for success in terms of writing, but also make it achievable in that session for them to be able to move on. So we looked at the interactive orals, and I was lucky enough to have you and Trudy Frenwick and Sam Hamill work with me and work through the rubrics and everything. Yeah, and it's just been amazing. And like you said, it was a huge cohort. It was 225 students. I had 7 casual markers, sessionals as they were then, casual markers as well. So that was also quite daunting, trying to get my head around how am I going to get 225 students and 7 casual markers doing this interactive oral. So it was quite a unique challenge, I guess, but it has been such a successful, it's just been so successful. The markers have loved it. The students, the feedback, we've got anecdotal feedback from the students is that they enjoy it, the majority of them. Yeah, and it's worked really, really well. Sorry, I went off topic. What was the question?
No, I think you addressed it, and especially that last part with the large cohort, because everybody worries, and I think I was very brave to take on such a big cohort in your first, iteration of IOA, because, you're learning, you have to train your markers as well. So
Yeah.
I think that was fantastic. I mean, we are here to support, but still, it's you who had to take that leap of faith as well. So we're very pleased to see how well you went. So excellent, and that definitely. I think helps people to keep that in mind, because it's a big issue for many academics to think, how am I going to manage with the large cohorts here?
And having sessionals, I was concerned because, I needed the sessionals the casuals to want to continue to work with me. I was really concerned about their workload and the stress that it would put on them. And by and far, they have loved it. And all of them have said to me they would much prefer to do interactive orals over reading a 2,000-word essay. Even though it's a little bit of getting their head around to begin with, I've been able to keep the same markers. The majority of them keep coming back. I've checked in with all of them to say, does this work for you? What do you think about it? And they love it. So it gives them really good job satisfaction, in fact, because they get to meet the students, they get to interact with the students. A lot of the sessionals, casual markers, are also tutors in other subjects, and because it's the first subject, they then have developed that relationship with them, and the students feel the same. They've developed a relationship with the markers. So it's really been a wonderful experience for the majority of, well, I haven't heard bad reports yet from anyone, but all of them have been more than happy to continue to do it. The markers are happy to do it. The students are happy. So yeah, it's been a really wonderful success.
Perfect. Thank you so much. That was very helpful. Okay, next question I have for you, Dane. Being in a health-based discipline, simulation-based assessments are very common in paramedicine or any other health-based disciplines. So why did you believe that you needed to implement an interactive oral in your subject, and how did you gain support to implement it?
Yeah, thanks, Amita, and just thanks for organising this great session today and having me along. I'll just hang on to something Lachlan said at the start too about, calling the panel experts. Well, for me, certainly, I still feel very early career and was very early career when I had to go on interactive oral assessment. So expert probably doesn't sit well with me, and I say that because I don't want people to feel that maybe they were a bit intimidated to have a go at interactive oral assessment. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. The reason I looked at it was quite straightforward initially. I picked up a subject early on in my career with Charles Sturt that was in a postgraduate diploma for nurses who are transitioning to paramedicine. So they're already registered healthcare professionals. They do a 1-year graduate diploma to get registration as a paramedic, and there's a heavy sort of accreditation drive to make sure that those capabilities required to be a paramedic are met in that program, in our undergraduate program, of course, as well. And one of those key domains of accredited practice is collaboration and communication. And there's a subject learning outcome in this subject I picked up that was around communication. And at the time, the subject was relying on online quizzes and written work and some skills-based assessment and intensive school. And when we were up for accreditation and trying to submit our evidence and what we were meeting there in terms of that communication and collaboration piece, it sort of became quite clear that the subject wasn't really hitting the mark in that format it was in. And so I reached out to educational designer support and got connected with the wonderful Trudy Frenwick and Amita and Sam. And Trudy looked at the program and suggested I have a look at interactive oral assessments as a modality. Never heard of them. I went and did a bit of digging around and thought, this sounds fantastic. And so I think there's two really exciting parts for this, is that they do have a simulation-based assessment in intensive school, but they're an online cohort with now a written assessment, an oral assessment in the middle, and a simulation-based assessment. And a couple of things came out of it. One, we could design the rubric in such a way that we could assess communication and both help them develop it further if they needed it, and assess it in this interactive oral assessment. But it really sequenced the theory to practice. It was a social presence theory to practice in the online environment in an interactive oral assessment, where we could pick up what they did in assessment 1 and draw out some more knowledge and challenge them a little bit, and then they could carry that knowledge through again and come into the intensive school, and it just seems to sequence really nicely. So yeah, first time having a go, driven by accreditation requirements, realizing we really weren't probably assessing communication as well as we could have. And then I feel, and certainly some of the feedback I'm getting, is that the sequence is really nice in that assessment program now. So yeah, hope that answers the question.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think communication skills in all professions, but especially in paramedicine, when they're dealing with patients in acute situations, it's really crucial. So I think well done on that, and thanks for sharing that.
Thanks.
Excellent. John, my question to you: the criminal justice cohort is also quite distinct, because it includes a range of students joining, right from school leavers to serving police officers. So why did you think that the interactive oral would suit them better as compared to more traditional assessments?
Thanks, Amita, and thanks everyone for having us and giving us a chance to talk about this today. I'll get to your question, Amita, but I thought it'd be worth pointing out, just because I think it's really interesting that all the panelists today have such different journeys to getting to sort of looking at and applying this as an assessment practice. And for me, we actually started, I think, and Amita might correct me if I'm wrong, it's about 2020 or 2021. Amita and others were running a community of practice here at CSU, working at getting interactive orals up and running as an assessment option. And I and a couple of other colleagues from the Centre for Law and Justice were really keen to be involved in that, and it actually was really fruitful. And I think we were one of, not certainly not the only, but we're one of the early adopters in terms of at a discipline level. And just if people are wondering, I think now we have, I can't remember off the top of my head, but I think we're probably up to maybe 5 or 6 subjects across our degree that is using interactive orals, and that's right across from first year up to third year. And they all look, they all share some similarities in the way we design them, which are sort of driven by the discipline. And I'll get to Amita's question with that in a moment, but they're also quite unique, and I think that's a really interesting aspect for us. And it links exactly to Amita's question, and I suspect other disciplines, some of you are probably thinking about the same sorts of questions. I have lots of, diverse learners coming from different backgrounds, maybe with really distinct and very different career goals, perhaps, or graduate destinations. As Amita said, in the centre, we're very much in that position that we do, at the time we instituted the interactive orals, we did have that range of students from school leavers to sort of people who are sort of mature age learners, or people already working in the actual profession who are upping their qualifications. And it's actually changed since we instituted that as well. Like everyone, we've undergone some sort of pretty big cohort changes over the last couple of years. And now, we teach a law degree, for example, in the centre, and we've seen some changes where now we actually have sort of people coming from the accredited law degree into criminal justice subjects and doing interactive orals as well, and they sort of have a very different approach to them along the way. So we were always sort of drawn to interactive orals for that reason, first of all, that we really wanted to develop an authentic assessment, because one of the real challenges for us in criminal justice, and I think this is a challenge for everyone, is not just to design authentic assessment, but authentic assessment that's understood both first by the students, as this is something that is something I might do as a graduate. This is a real world skill that I'm building here. And then for us to be able to link what we do in sort of essentially critical knowledge building and critical thinking skills, being able to get students to find ways to apply that in an authentic assessment setting. For us, that was really important because, and like I said, I suspect lots of disciplines like this, it's a real challenge for us, I think, in criminal justice, policing, and other areas, that we can have authentic assessment that mirrors or models what a graduate would do once they leave us and they've graduated and they've gone on to work, which is fantastic. But the challenge we always fought in criminal justice was making sure that we don't sort of go far into authentic assessment that we lose the critical skills that we want students to develop. One of the very core things we would do in criminology, for example, is we critically examine criminal justice institutions, the institutions that a graduate might go on to work in. And one of the risks then, and there's a sort of a literature around this, which is quite interesting, one of the risks of authentic assessment is that it just becomes a mirror of what's happening in practice, and it loses the ability for the sort of more bottom-up critical thinking to come out of the academy that can influence practice in the future. So we were really mindful of that when there was sort of a longer-term push to use authentic assessment. We really wanted an authentic assessment that allowed us to not just be, sort of falling into that sort of cycle of just rehashing sort of official discourses and what was happening in practice, because we want graduates, and I'm sure we all do, graduates who can not only sort of, go out and work in that environment and have the skills, but we want graduates that can improve that practice, can influence that practice, and we didn't want to lose sight of that. So interactive orals for us were absolutely that. It was a really novel type of authentic assessment, which not only allowed us to do something for a wide range of students coming from a wide range of sort of learning backgrounds, ages, positions in their careers, and all these sorts of things, but one that also allowed us to marry those two things together was really important. The other thing we're trying to do at the time, of course, is, and I said this last time I talked about interactive orals, is that AI was just a distant blip on the horizon in 2020. We weren't really talking about AI very much at all. But we were talking about other things like contract cheating and plagiarism. So interactive orals were absolutely driven for us by that as well, as this idea of we weren't using terms like secure assessment as much sort of 4 or 5 years ago, but of course now it's very much come back into focus, and interactive orals have been from the start something that really does that well for us also. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thanks, John. And you brought that valuable insight, how important interactive orals are in drawing out students' critical thinking skills. So thank you so much for sharing that. So, I hope that helps all the attendees get an idea of the context from where our panelists are coming from, and then you probably be able to ask them questions in that relation too. So I'll move on to more common questions across the panels and panelists, and please feel free to jump in first, or decide you didn't prefer not to. Sam, did you want to ask?
I do, and it's actually just a repeating of what's in the chat. Thank you, everyone, for the wonderful panel you've assembled today and this information you're sharing with us now from your experiences. The key thing I'd love to see in particular is the rubrics that are being used to describe these assessment pathways to students and enable their moderation for individuals across cohorts or within teams. That's the part which I know I'm expecting to see a lot more of in the future as these models become exceptionally important for undergrads through to postgrad and the classical HDR Viva, which we know is the strongest model for the interactive oral assessment. I would love to see this, or interactive conversational assessment, pardon me. I just love to see those resources which are student facing for these elements too. We've, in my experience, run debates in classrooms which were assessed, but the structure of the debate wasn't really lending itself very well to the research process that informed it. It was all very individual projects, and coming together for a debate was awkward. So I'm keen to see what you have as a student resource. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. There'll be more on that a little bit later. So thanks a lot. Okay, so my first question to the panelists, so beyond the well-documented benefits of interactive orals, such as enhanced student engagement, employability skills, and academic integrity, what unique or even perhaps unexpected advantage have you observed in your own implementation? Who would like to go first? Yeah, Praneeth, you can.
I'm happy to jump in if it's okay, actually. And As I mentioned earlier on, whilst when we were designing interactive oral assessments in my course, the academic integrity stuff was there, but it wasn't front and center. At the forefront of my approach was about inclusivity. One of the things that we often forget is that we've got increasingly diverse students in our classrooms, and as the classrooms become bigger and bigger, the diversity just increases exponentially. And not all students have and what you call an ELS plan or ELP equity plan or whatever you might call it in your university. And I always remind people that for each student that submits one, there's another 9 who will not submit or have not submitted or will never submit. So I was conscious of that fact. So I wanted to make sure that when I'm giving my students an assessment, I want to see that it is inclusive, that it is sort of helping all students succeed. So when we have those in-person interactive oral assessments, there's me there and my tutors there in the class observing the students and sort of guiding them along, nudging them along. And if they experience any kind of overwhelming anxiety, we are there with them. We can sort of guide them along and say, look, okay, yep, I can see you are overly nervous. Let's stop for a little while. Let's take a break. Let's have a glass of water, and then we'll start again. Now, that type of opportunity does not exist in a traditional exam. Students often suffer and go through that process on their own in a typical written lockdown exam. So for me, that was very, very important. But more important and related to that was, once we did these oral assessments, my apologies, interactive oral assessments, one of the things that we noticed was the students just absolutely loved talking to us. You know, that you could see it in their face, the opportunity for them to just sit down with their teachers and have a proper conversation with us. They loved it. And we loved it as well. We really enjoyed the process. So there was a huge opportunity for us to then connect with our students, to really emphasize the relationship that we have with our students. So to me, I think that was quite an important part of the interactive oral assessment. And if nothing else, that is the reason that I want to continue to use it.
Yeah, that's excellent, Praneeth. Thank you so much. Belinda.
One of the things I found, which was I didn't expect, was that it actually reduced the amount of GPs I had at the end of the session. So my interactive oral assessment is assessment 3. So it's the last assessment. So we have two. The first one is like a stake. What are they called? Not a stakeholder one. A hurdle one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just to sort of, it's only worth a very small amount, and it's just to sort of help get them writing academically. And then so assessment 3 is the interactive oral, and it's the last one. But because it's the last assessment, what we find is that, what I found over the last 4 sessions doing it, 5 sessions now, I've gone from having maybe 30 or 40 GPs in a large cohort to maybe 2. So that was really surprising to me. I was really surprised by that. The amount, and as Praneeth said, just how much the students enjoy talking to us and meeting us and speaking with us. And I think because in my cohort, obviously they're all going to be teachers, so it is part of what they're going to be doing is having conversations and stuff. But they seem to really enjoy it. And although at the beginning all of them might seem a little anxious, we have a bit of a chat, and that we're here to support you. And if you go off track, we'll redirect you with a question. And like, we really are here to give you the best opportunity to pass, like as much as we can. We, so if we're redirecting you, pay attention. We're going to try and bring you back. If you go off on a tangent, we'll bring you back. And by the end of it, all of them that I've asked, like, we have a little debrief at the end as well. How are you feeling now that it's over? And all of them are like, oh, that was so amazing. I wish I could do all of my assessments that way. I can't believe how good it was. And last session, I actually had a student that had a really profound stammer. One of the most difficult stammers I've ever experienced with children or students, and it was quite profound. And she emailed me her study access plan. I told her that we could take additional time, that we could stop anytime she needed, that we could take breaks, that, you know, it wouldn't matter. And that if she really felt that this was too difficult for her, that we could look at another alternative. She wanted to do it. She ended up getting a HD. She was amazing. Her knowledge was amazing. And it was just amazing to watch her. Like, she would literally gasp and then have to sort of breathe and then try and get all of the words out and then stop again. And so it was a really profound stammer that she had. And she just did so well, which made it prove to me, I guess, even though I could already see it, how equitable it was. And yeah, predominantly the students that were doing maybe passes in their written works were getting HDs in their oral assessments, because their knowledge was there. It was just that their academic writing, and being first session, first semester, you know, it made sense that their writing wasn't up where it needed to be. So this was a really equitable way, which I just hadn't ever thought of, I guess, in that way before. So yeah, I just wanted to say that they were things that I was really surprised by.
That's excellent, Belinda, and thanks for bringing that example too, because those are some of the concerns everybody has in the back of their mind before they take, you know, commit to doing an assessment like that. But before I go to John, I still also want, because we have chatted about this before, you wanted to share something about your markers as well. What a benefit that you didn't expect to see as a result of marking interactive oral assessments.
Me? That was to me?
Yeah.
Sorry,
Yeah.
say that again, the markers, the benefits I got from the markers.
Yeah, how they're, you know, choosing the subjects they're delivering.
Oh, yeah, sorry, yes, I forgot about that. So yeah, so because with the way that my interactive orals are structured, they can actually, because most of the assessments are set at the end of semester, my interactive orals are completed in week 12 and 13, I think it is, at the end of the session. And so the markers do it over 2 weeks. I email them a timetable. They tell me what times they're available, what days they're available, when it's going to work for them. And they've said because of that, they're able to take on other subjects because the marking isn't all hitting at the one, like the 15-day turnaround isn't all at the one end, because basically by the time session ends, they're finished with my assessments, my subject's done, because they literally, they have 30 minutes allocated for their 10-minute interactive oral, just in case there's issues with the internet or anything. And the majority of them say that they will they take notes while they're doing it, and they can pretty much have the rubric completed and finished and the comments up and ready to go by the end of that 30 minutes. And so they said that really works well for them, because then they know what other subjects they can take on, because my assessments don't align at the same time as other subjects typically do, which they said works really well for their workload, which, yeah, I forgot about that. And that was really a really good bonus. And that they all keep picking it. They keep asking it. So I'm like, that's great that you keep wanting to work with me.
Yeah, that's wonderful to know that there is something in it for the academics and markers as well. Now, I just want to say, because of my screen, I can only see people on my screen. I'm not seeing the questions. I can see there are a lot of comments and questions coming in. Can we just hold on, hold off till the main questions are finished, so that people get opportunity to ask those questions as well. Sorry, John, you wanted to say something.
Oh, thanks, Melinda. I just wanted to very quickly add something, and it's just sort of reinforcing what Pranit and Belinda was saying, that, you know, when we run our first couple of cohorts in 2021, a colleague and I, Emma Colvin, and I collected some data and surveyed students about their experiences, and we were able to sort of collate that and publish it later on. And yeah, we saw really similar things. One of the things we saw, a lot of students said they were quite stressed about it or nervous about it, viewing it as a bit of a presentation, and that was something they felt they weren't getting a lot of experience in as students. They weren't, maybe, you know, oral communication wasn't something they were getting a lot of practice in. So they were sort of indicating they're quite stressed, but then also, which is really good, they indicated that once they actually sat the interactive oral, they realized that it was a really positive experience, and it reinforced their maybe not their desire to keep doing presentations and stuff, but it certainly put them at ease about the idea of doing something that involved oral communication as a student. So that was really good. And they were able to sort of, from that as well, really communicate to us that a good percentage of them sort of had a better understanding of how what they learned translated to practice later on as well. That was a pretty strong outcome that we're finding from the student data that we collected. So that was really good. And then just one final thing, sorry, I won't hold us up. On the flip side is when I've spoken to other staff, and this is in other disciplines as well, one of the, I think the biggest strengths of interactive orals for us, and I think other people would agree, is that, and you guys were sort of all hinting at this, compared to an essay or something like that, I've always walked out of an interactive oral really, really confident I understand what the student knows and doesn't know, and what skills they have and they don't have. And I think I get a much clearer and better idea of that from an interactive oral than pretty much any other assessment practice that I've used, certainly more than, you know, an essay or something. If a student communicates something poorly in an essay or something like that, I walk away going, they might understand it, they might not. It's not very clear. An interactive oral, as we heard from everyone else, you have that opportunity to say, you just explain that a bit further. If they can, you find out that they did understand it and they just explained it poorly. If they can't go on, then you know that you've hit the limit of their knowledge or their skill in that area. So I've always found it, for all its other benefits, I think it's one of the most accurate assessment tools I've ever used in terms of really gaining a more holistic understanding of where my students are at, what they know, and how well they can apply what they know, much more than most other assessment types, I think.
Yeah, that's an excellent insight and absolutely spot on what we found through our research as well, that the academics are so much more confident about their students' knowledge, skills, and their readiness to join the profession, because that's always a worry. We're letting these people graduate. Are they, you know, fit to do the job? So excellent. Thanks for bringing that in. Dane, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I can add something short, and mine's probably obvious, but at the time, the purposes of me bringing in interactive oral assessment, I hadn't quite factored in some of these outcomes, these benefits. But engaging with students in the second of three assessments that's kind of spread across a session in my context was this opportunity to kind of work with their feedback literacy and pick up on how they're travelling and hopefully allow them to correct some of their learning or understanding or identify areas for improvement prior to coming into the intensive school and having further assessment in what is our hurdle task across the program, the simulation-based assessment. So it was really nice to be able to, you know, I refer to it sometimes as a simulated professional conversation. And in that interaction, after multiple prompting of a student's knowledge isn't quite there, you also have this opportunity, particularly in the simulation that we're having in this conversation in the paramedicine context, to give them some tips and tricks and almost education in that moment, this assessment of and for learning kind of at once. So some of those benefits, that connection space, helping them identify learning gaps and moving forward, were obvious. And some of you go, that's sort of obvious. But for me, it wasn't the outcome I was sort of hoping for. It was just, it's a really nice effect. So, yeah.
Excellent. Sounds good. I might as well skip forward and address the elephant in the room, which is the AI, which is what triggers a new interest in this assessment format as well. So a recent study, the AI in higher education, capturing student perspectives, surveyed about 8,000 students across 4 participating universities and found that about 83% of students are using Gen AI tools for their studies. 79% use AI to answer their questions, and 44% using AI platforms daily. So have you encountered any concerns or evidence of students attempting to use these types of tools inappropriately during your interactive orals? Yeah, Belinda, you go.
Yeah, so like I said, our cohort is notorious for, or was notorious for, academic misconduct in terms of plagiarism, because all of our subjects are online. So all of the interactive orals are done online over Zoom. And what we found before AI exploded was that out of assessment 3, I would maybe out of 200 plus cohort, we would maybe get 3 or 4 fails for the interactive oral, and that was pretty typical. And this session just gone, when AI exploded more, I had like quite a few more, like 20. I think, what did I have? I think I had more fails than I've ever had before, and I thought, what's going on here? So then the way that we moderate is the Marcus set up the Zoom meeting and they add me as a host. So I'm an alternative host, so I get the recording as well. And so I go back through and I went back through and watched all of the, I watch all the fails and HDs anyway, but I went back through and watched all the fails and all the passes that were just on the cusp. And then I went back and had a look at their assessment 1 and assessment 2 and realised that a lot of the ones that were failing in the interactive oral were actually HDs in the assessment 1 and assessment 2. And then when I looked further, I realised that actually they had fabricated references and things like that. But the other thing that we noticed was that, and I don't know if it's just because of the way early childhood's positioned, but in early childhood, it's much more about, as opposed to the old model of the teacher sort of holds the knowledge and imparts the knowledge to the students. Early childhood is much more about collaborative, like learning from the children, bringing them along, interacting, and AI still very much positions the teacher as the knowledge holder. And so the way that the students structured what they were saying was very much positioned in that very old sort of school way, I guess, of that I'm the person who knows everything and I will tell the child how to do this. And so that's why they weren't doing well. And also the way that they were talking, because I could see some of the fails were typing the question and then reading it, but it's really hard in that 10 minutes to read something in text and then turn it into a conversational a conversational line. So that's how we picked up that that they were actually doing something that could have been misconduct. And then when I went back and looked at the others, we picked it up that way. Now that's not to say that in the future AI won't be able to change that as well, but currently that's what we were noticing, is that it was doing that. And one of the other things we do to make sure that they are the student, they actually, which Amita, all of them do, they have to hold up their student ID or their license. So there's a picture of me and my name in the camera, so that we know that it's not the cousin doing it or the partner doing it. So that's another way that we know that it's them. But that was one of the things I was really surprised by. That I didn't sort of think that AI would be that prevalent in early childhood yet, just because they're not super savvy tech people. They sometimes struggle with their emails. So I was really surprised how much AI was being used, and that again the interactive oral caught that, because they were failing assessment 3 and passing assessment 1 and 2 with flying colours, which highlighted that they had been using AI there too. Anyway, sorry.
But no, that's very interesting. And also it actually brings out another important point, which is what I've been also saying to academics that I've been working with, is that you don't have to police each and every assessment, because it's a lot of burden on the academics' workload as well. So if you have one assessment that can ensure that students know what they're supposed to know and they're achieving the learning outcomes, it takes a lot of that pressure off, and we are again secure. So excellent. Thanks for sharing that example. John, you wanted to add to that?
I think Praneet might have had his hand up first, if you want to go to him.
Look, with the question of AI, I think in my case, for example, for the vast majority of my students, I do the interactive orals in person. So they're sitting in front of me basically. But the thing that I'd probably point out over here is that my interactive orals it takes the open book, open internet, and open AI concept. So I do it I book our meeting room and I set up a place for the students to bring their laptop and the iPad and any other device that they want, and they set all this up, and there's a glass of water for them to become comfortable and all of those sort of things. And I've sort of, in my interactive orals, I say, if you want to use the internet, if you want to use AI, you're allowed to use it during those conversations. But for the last 2.5 years that I've used it, not a single student has used any AI or any computer tools, because they just love talking to us. So they don't actually, but they come in with all the devices and they set it all up. So, and they ask me, are you sure I can use AI during this? Yeah, you can use AI if you feel like it, but they don't. 2.5 years that so many times that we used it, not a single student. Having said that, I'm not saying that they will not use it if I had it online and I said, don't use it, for example. So there are places where I allow my students to use it, and the places where I say, no, you're not allowed to use it. So I think you've got to find, as Amita mentioned, you've got to find where the balance is. if in my case, for example, if a student engages with AI, if I for 30 seconds and then turns around and then has a conversation about me, about what we found out about through AI, I don't necessarily see there's anything bad about it because they're not reading it off verbatim of AI. So to me, I think I'm still comfortable with that. But it hasn't happened. So
yeah, that's very interesting and brilliant because you preempted my next question of how you allow the use of AI. But that's very interesting because I guess we have not progressed to that stage. So thanks for sharing that. John, you were going to add something?
Yeah, just quickly on AI. I mean, there's a couple of interesting things. I know probably other people here might have attended the TEXA presentation we had. I think maybe it was 6-12 months ago about use of AI. And it sort of, they showed a presentation about all the different sort of types of technology students are employing. One of them was actually an AI tool as part of interactive orals or that type of online engagement between a student and a staff member. And my colleagues were really clear in their appraisal of that. The example they showed, for anyone who missed it, a student just had a little window open. The window was using AI and it could hear what the assessor was asking them. It would go from speech to text and then provide them an answer they could read off the screen. And it seemed to work well in terms of the technology capturing it all, but we were all of the opinion, and my colleagues in particular, Emma Coleman and others, were of the opinion that the answers that AI were giving, even if they weren't something we would immediately identify as AI, they were very poor answers. They were answers that we were convinced would either be, so generic that we would think that it was probably AI, or so sort of lacking in detail that the student would struggle to get to a pass anyway, especially at least in the type of interactive orals that we were running. So, there was that presentation, there was that risk involved. But we were convinced that the threat of it wasn't as significant, that students aren't going to just plug in an AI tool and get HDs across interactive orals. We thought that it was actually quite the other way around.
Yeah, it's a good example, John. And as of now, that works. We don't know where technology will go next. So yeah, I guess we have to just, stay on our toes. So yeah, no, thanks for sharing that. Dane.
Yeah, I think John just covered some of the things I was thinking about. That presentation of them using software, AI software, to engage. It listens and then gives you the response. I'm convinced, and there'll be people who laugh at me, I'm convinced I'm going to be able to see the student doing that. Maybe not. Maybe the technology will get so advanced. But the fact that you can work hard in that initial setup, the task and the rubric, to allow scope for the conversational nature, I'm still struggling with this idea that a student would be able to read quick enough to what the AI prompts to then have the conversation flow. And so it's about finding that balance of how can you be consistent in your, as consistent as possible in your marking. The more unscripted you get, it gets a little bit problematic. But, that's the bigger piece about longitudinal assessment and things. But yeah, as long as you can get some conversational aspect to this thing, I'm convinced it's going to be, for most students, quite difficult to use even those more advanced AI options. But, I could be very wrong with how quickly it's all advancing.
Thanks, Dane. Lachlan, you had your hand up?
Yeah, sorry. I just would point out as well that a lot of the questions that have come in so far, both in the Q&A and in the chat, there's obviously a lot of interest around the pragmatic elements of rolling these tasks out, the logistics, etc. So I guess I might draw some attention to some of those when we have a moment, please, Amina.
Yeah, sure. And actually, there is so much to talk about. So I just want to do 2 quick questions. So feel free to jump in, and if you want to pass, that's fine as well. And again, Pranit, you have already preempted that. So basically what I was going forward, wanted to ask was about the future, because this is such an evolving space, and we know that, one day deepfakes are going to be very easily available too. So it's a very fast-paced environment as well. So what strategies have you implemented or are considering in that regard to safeguard the interactive orals? Or conversely, again, to what Pranit alluded already, is that if you want to design that as an open assessment, how are you planning? Have you already embedded or planning to use AI to enhance your student learning? So both ways, either safeguard as a secure assessment or as a lane to open assessment, how would you embed AI? Yep, Dane, you go first.
Yeah, thanks. I think we're probably fortunate, if that's the right word, in a lot of our paramedic programs, and others may feel similar in their courses, that we do have opportunity to see the students in person. So like Pranit talked about, there's this opportunity to look at where our assessments fall, and maybe it's not always ideal to have an interactive oral right at the end in intensive school and things for our online cohort, but there is multiple opportunities when we think about it to engage with them in person to hopefully reduce the risk. But just leaning into the second part of the question, because I do have my head in the sand a bit about the online AI risk, but the supporting them with AI literacy and how to use AI. I saw a presentation at a simulation event a little while back now that was a simple use of ChatGPT and its voice function, where you could give students a document, which is basically a case study with all the information required to answer that case study, almost like the marker's guide. You upload it to the AI software, and then the students have an oral conversation with the AI tool. And it gives responses based on what it's told to with the case, and then also feedback at the end. And so I'm really interested in how the package I've already started to add to that supports them in their preparedness for an interactive oral. Can we also lean into AI in that way to get them practicing these oral assessments? It's all well and good sometimes to say, keep practicing and talk to your peers and your friends and that, but not everyone's going to have that opportunity nor know how to do it. So yeah, I'm interested in exploring that, something on the horizon.
I think that's fantastic. And I think that's a natural progression from where we are at the moment with our use and implementation of AI, that would be the next thing. So I think that's good. And if you do, we look forward to hearing your feedback. So thanks for sharing that. Belinda and John, any comments?
I would say we're maybe this isn't directly around interactive orals themselves as an assessment, but I think, just like Dane was saying then, I know we have some ongoing work around other assessments, especially in the early stages of study, where we're looking at changing our assessments, where students are asked to interrogate AI outputs or to critique or to incorporate them in a way where they're assessing how useful they are and when and where they're useful. So, there's that sort of ongoing thing, I guess, sort of helps us move in that direction.
Excellent. Pranit.
Yeah, look, AI use, I think it's a very interesting phenomena, if you like, in terms of the way students are using it, the way we are using it. Way back, when I say way back, this is going back over 10 years ago, when I was teaching at a different university and a first year introductory information systems course. Students were sitting at the back and they were Googling and fact checking my stuff in real time, right? And I, rather than stopping them from doing that, I would encourage them to do that. And in fact, many students would come and challenge me, Pranit, but Google says this, right? You said something else. Why? Why did you? So some of my colleagues would take an offense to that, but I would say, look, hey, quite often there's interpretations, as we know, right? And if I'm not able to make my interpretations explicit, then the students sometimes get the wrong impression. So if the students are doing those fact checking in real time, that is a good thing. They're doing that using AI in real time now, right? And if anybody has taught a course in a computer lab, for example, before AI, for example, the students would turn the screens around, and as you walk past, all these browsers will go closing off, kind of thing. And I was teaching a similar class some time ago, and then I stopped at once. I said, look, I stopped once, don't close the browser. Tell me, what are you doing? I really want to know, what are you doing? Not because I want to punish you, but I genuinely want to know. And they were watching online games. And I still can't get my head around other people watching online games. So I sat down, pulled a chair and sat down with this student. And I wanted the student to explain to me, what's the fascination? What's the big deal? So he started to explain the games and things. There's a little number on the top right-hand corner. And I asked the student, what is that number? And that number was the amount of money that is being donated towards those players. And within 15 minutes, it was hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? So there's big money in that space. the students are using AI in a very similar sort of way at the moment. And in my classes, for example, at the beginning of AI, I'd be teaching a lecture and the students all have the laptops out, typical classroom. But as you try and walk around, they start closing that ChatGPT window quickly. So once I realized that's what they're doing, and then I came back in front and I said, look, don't stop. Keep doing it, keep using it, right? Because what they're doing is they're using AI to reconfirm what I'm teaching. It's like a personal tutor for many of the students sitting with them. They're in the classroom. So while I'm teaching, they're using AI to do that. I was fortunate enough to teach a cohort of students in the first semester of the postgraduate course, and then as well as a middle one, and then a capstone course as well. And in the capstone course, the same group of students, I asked them, okay, use AI. I gave them an activity. I said, look, use AI to do this activity and put it on the whiteboard and explain like that. Most students who had started with me at the beginning went to not using AI when they were at capstone. So I asked them, why aren't you using AI? And they said, well, it's not very good. And when they said that, I said, oh my God, this is amazing. Now they've developed the evaluative judgment to be able to make those kind of judgments that you and I have as professionals. That's what we want students to develop. But if we stop students from using it, even in those trivial ways inside the classrooms, they don't develop those nuanced understanding about what AI is, what it can do, what it can't do. They're unable to make judgments about the AI output. So I think encouraging students to do that, certainly in my case, I found it extremely valuable and extremely refreshing to see.
That's a very powerful example. Thanks for sharing that, because I think we are all striving for students to become critical thinkers, and the way you've done it is definitely a good example for many of us to consider moving forward. So thanks a lot for sharing that. Belinda.
Yeah, similar to John, you know, it was evident in ours that AI actually wasn't helping the students for the interactive oral. It was actually hindering them, and it wasn't the way to go for them at the moment. That doesn't mean it won't change. But I think too, like Casey is here somewhere. I'm sure I saw her, Casey Hillier, and she's working on SimLabs in her research on, you know, where it's a simulation lab where you can, and I think that's amazing to be able to do something like that. But you know, until I get to that level where I can have a platform where I can have a simulation lab, which would be awesome for teaching. I think the interactive orals, because they're so mine are scenario based, they're based in practice, so in the profession, and they're very practical. I guess my subject is wellbeing, so it's all about wellbeing. So the different scenarios, but essentially the educator, the student who's an educator, is coming to talk to the director, which is me, of a service, and they're bringing to me an issue that they have a concern about of a colleague who has wellbeing issues, and that's the scenario that they're talking about, and they've got to talk to that. But the great thing about the interactive oral, and if you are thinking about an interactive oral, I strongly suggest you get Amita or Trudy or Sam to help you with this, because they get the nuance of it and they help me with the rubric, they help me develop all of it. But it's the switches. So not only are we there supporting the students and saying, tell me more, oh, you started to talk about that, can you explain that a little more? But for the students who seem to be really good with it, you can extend them by twisting it a bit. So one of the things, not twisting it, that sounds a bit mean, but throwing a curveball at them. So one of them I like to do, so one of our scenarios is a co-worker has had a lot of sick leave, it's putting extra stress on other staff, etc., etc. And so they often will say, you know, we just need to support them and we need to give them, you know, extra sick days and stuff. And so then if they're doing really well and I can see that they really understand the concepts, you know, you can get them to be critical. So it's like, well, you know, but why is it my job? Like, why should I care if, you know, such and such is calling in sick? Like, that's not my job. I show up to work every day. You're here every day. Like, why should I worry that she's sick? And it kind of throws them, and you can see that they've got to think really quickly and be really critical and extend that a bit more. And, oh, well, you know, and they pull out some really great things. But also the AI tends to go to the NQS, which is the National Quality Standards in Early Childhood, the regulations. It pulls up things like that. So they'll say to me, oh, Regulation 88 says blah, 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 blah. But in an interactive oral, I can also say, well, what does that mean in relation, like explain that more to me. How does that relate to this scenario, and tell me why I should, why I need to be understanding of that for this situation. So it kind of pushes them to be that critical thinking, which is what we want. So I do think that it's got that, and I might be a bit like Dane, I might be a bit unsure of, I might be thinking AI is not quite as clever as it is, but I really think that the human element of it is what really makes it difficult, because you're moving so fast and you've only got 10 minutes, and they have to think quick, I guess, almost, to be able to respond. And I don't think they've got enough time to read the prompt, think about what it's saying, even if it's generating it as they talk. I don't think they're quite there yet. That's not to say they won't be, but if they get to that point, I'm chasing Casey down for the sim labs, because I think they're amazing as well.
Yeah, no, excellent. But that's a good example of, either making it open, but also, embedding it in a way that you still can draw a bit more critical thinking from your students. So thank you. I'm mindful of time. One last question, and really give me a short, sharp answer if you can, please. Looking ahead, how do you see iOS evolving in your subject or discipline?
I'll jump in first, if that's okay. One of the pressures we have, like everyone, is how we're going to be offering our course in the future in terms of modalities and things like that, including, fully online courses or only online subjects. And I know that's not something that every discipline can do, but it might be something that it's certainly something we're looking at. And for all the reasons we said, I think interactive orals are really valuable, because we might lose that face-to-face. We might be only getting that sort of more short online presence where we're meeting with multiple students. And as we heard from everyone who's been running them, everyone on the panel, students are always saying how much they appreciate a chance to sit one-on-one with their lecturer or their academic, and to be able to be assessed in that way. So I think there's some value to it. One of the things that I'm aware of is that we probably, we might be moving to more online only study. And because I think we're already running interactive orals in that medium already, and it's up and running and works pretty well, I think all the things that we value of it in terms of what we find the students appreciate of it will be even more important if we are sort of losing our ability to run sort of face-to-face and moving online more. Then interactive orals absolutely are already set up to really accommodate that. And add some what I think the students would find valuable to their course as they go as well.
That's excellent. Thanks, John. Who wants to go next?
I can go if it's okay, Amita. As you know, I do like to talk, and people online probably would have observed that already. I love interactive oral assessments. You would have figured that out already. It's unlikely that I will be pulling back away from it at any time. It's just redefining the model, how we do it, better engagement. But something that I just wanted to share with everyone at the moment, just after this, I'm doing another presentation for an internal conference here at University of New South Wales, and that's on diversity and equity. And the folks have invited me to come and talk about interactive oral assessments, because they think that it actually aligns really well within students from as an inclusive assessment, students on neurodivergent students, all of those types of things as well. So I think for me, not so much about the actual structure of the interactive oral assessments, but the focus of the interactive oral assessments as a compassionate assessment is what I think that I would like to advocate for, because it certainly is, as everyone on the panel has alluded to. I mean, here we are there with the students during an assessment process. There's very few other forms of assessment that allow that kind of interactions to occur, and very few other forms of assessment that allows us as assessors to respond to students' needs, as Belinda pointed out, in flight and assessment, right? So I think in that sense, interactive oral assessment, yes, it's upholding academic integrity and all of those sort of things, but it's actually a compassionate assessment.
Thanks, Praneeth. That's a really good point. And I have also written about it, that it's a really an equitable assessment and very supportive of our students. So thanks for sharing that. Any quick thoughts from Dan and Belinda?
Yeah, I think I'm just excited about the opportunities to start looking at all those, as I said before, simulated professional conversation opportunities. If it meets the subject learning outcomes, you know, it's obviously got for us course learning outcomes, and I think most people on the screen probably have similar in some way or another, those interprofessional skills such as communication. I think there's a lot of creative opportunity for staff to look at this modality across a program. And I'm also really excited as we start to look, you know, saying programmatic assessment as a term, we're bringing in another term in today's conversation when terminology is important. But even if we just think about longitudinal assessment, IOAs formatively for students is something that I can imagine seeing it evolve to a bit more. And yeah, I'm really interested to see what happens in that space.
Excellent. That's a really good point. Thanks, Dan. Belinda.
Well, clearly I love the interactive oral, even with my huge cohort, and I think that they're brilliant and they work so well. And yeah, I think the soft, I think what I love most about it is that it is not only assessing their learning, and I get to meet the students and the students get to meet the markers and things like that, and they get that connection, that relationship connection, which is so important. But I also think it's a practical, it's in my situation, it's such a practical assessment, because they are going to be doing this, you know, not necessarily coming and having a meeting with the director about wellbeing, but they will be having meetings with people. They have to meet with parents, they have to meet with principals, they have to meet with directors, they have to meet with other teachers. And it's such a practical skill that they have to use in their workplace all the time. And so I think it's just such a yeah, what is it when it's authentic assessment? Like, it's really part of what they do, it's part of their work. And we have students that have you know, anxiety and things like that, and all of them seem to be like, we've done it now for 5 sessions, they get through it, we support them, we give them extra time, we have a conversation with them. Like Praneeth said, if they seem nervous, we give them a few extra minutes. We, you know, we relate to them and we talk to them and say, we know you're nervous, don't be nervous, I'm here to help you, I'm going to support you, I'll do everything I can, you know, I'll redirect you. Yeah, and all of that seems to alleviate their stress. And like I said, the student with the profound stammer, I was blown away by her. The fact that she, you know, that would have been anxiety inducing beyond belief, and she got a HD, which I was just, you know, that's so amazing. She did so well. So yeah, I think it's great. I love them.
Thanks. Oh yeah, we do. We all love it. Interactive orals. I also wanted to add to that as well. So just for newcomers who have not implemented them, of course, we scaffold them in a subject, but there is room to scaffold them in a whole qualification. You can scaffold them across subjects in the same year as well. You can have individual or group assessment because it's very flexible. You can use it formatively. Like Dan said, that was an excellent suggestion. And also, as we move and the focus on supervised assessment, if there is a requirement to get to a certain percentage, you can just raise the value of the interactive oral. That takes a lot of pressure off, and you know, you can assess your students in a very short time too. So thanks everyone. Thanks all the panelists. Oh, Belinda, you wanted to add something?
Sorry, I just wanted to add one more thing. I noticed that a lot of people are saying about the workload, and that honestly, the workload to create the interactive oral would have been as much as to change the other assessment around, and it really wasn't much more than what it would have been to rewrite another assessment. And the workload that it takes me to set it up every session is really quite minimal. I am lucky that my faculty supports it. So Damien Maloney, I think his name is, I send him my timetable with my markers, and he creates me a WordPress page, and it runs, if anyone's seen the embedded tutors, it runs like the embedded tutors. They click on the marker, they find the date, they find the time. It really doesn't take a lot of my time, to be honest, and the markers love it. It doesn't take much of their time. Like I said, all of them have said how much they would rather do that than the 2,000 word essay. Yeah, so workload wise, it works for me, and it works for my markers, and it really isn't much more than what it was to write a new assessment anyway. So sorry, just wanted to say that.
No, thanks. You already addressed one question anyway. So I just wanted to thank everyone for your contribution, and maybe let's just open this for questions. Lachlan can pick some from the chat, or if people want to come off mute, if you just raise your hand, then we know and we can get people to come off mute and ask questions.
Amita, I've just mentioned in the chat, I know that there's a resource around interactive orals that you've collated within the Teaching Academy hub. I know as some people are starting to go, etc. We will
Yeah,
drop
might
the
as
link
well.
to that into the chat as well, so that people will know where to find some of those resources, if you don't mind. So look, I'll look at the Q&A, etc. The chat's been very, very lively throughout the session, and I think we can probably safely say that we'll be going back and looking at everything that's been raised in there as well, so that where things need a more substantive response, we can provide that and drop that back in for everyone to look at. It'll probably inform some kind of Q&A type document as well after the event. So
Sure.
where people want specific examples. Belinda, there were a couple of questions asked about academic integrity, etc. When you were running your IOAs, and whether you were able to follow up or action those with either with the different teams at the uni. Did you see those? I can read those out if you like.
Which ones? Sorry, I didn't. Which ones were they? Just about.
Right. So when you saw fabricated references, one of the examples you were talking about, did you bring, I guess, allegations in that space?
Yep, I did. And it was flagged because it was flagged in the interactive oral. So they didn't fabricate anything in the interactive oral, but because they did so well in assessment 1 and 2, like HDs and distinctions, and then fails or just barely passing, which is typically students do much better in the interactive oral. That was what made me go back and look at A1 and A2. And I was like, hang on, this doesn't make sense. Why are they failing or barely passing in assessment 3 and they're getting HDs and distinctions? Because if they know the content, they should have got a HD in A3, because their writing is obviously quite good in assessment 1 and assessment 2. And that's where I identified the fabricated references and flagged it to academic misconduct, for falsified references and things like that.
Just from my own curiosity, I'm going to selfishly ask on that same note, I'm assuming the weighting for the interactive oral was significantly more than those preliminary tasks?
I think I've got it sitting at, 55%, I think, in my assessment 3. So it's the majority of the assessments, the 3 assessments. So assessment 2's 40%, I think, and then assessment 1 is like 10%, because it's literally just a hurdle one to get them to be able to practice writing and think about grammar. It's 600 words that they write, so it's just a really small engagement sort of one to get them there. And for mine, because I would really like to have it earlier, the interactive oral, but because it's their first year, their first session, their first subject, and a lot of them aren't technically savvy, it's just too much to put it any earlier in my subject. But in my other subjects, I would look at putting it, maybe in a different spot, not the last one, but it might work for the last one for everyone. I don't know. Obviously, Dane's is in the middle, but it's just my cohort it would have been too overwhelming to get them up and running, and that larger cohort as well, to get the markers back in time. And, because they're all still, some of them are still dropping out after census. So,
Right, thank you for that. I guess while we're talking about logistics, Dane, you had a question in there about running postgraduate IOAs, and I know you put a comment in the Q&A about how you kind of ran them. Would you mind just talking to that a little bit? We might unpack it for people here in terms of the time required in that space around marking and I guess how that workload was handled. Just might help if you talk it through.
Yeah, if I've answered the question there, and please, follow-up questions. But for the instance I had, we really had to push what we were trying to cover in terms of meeting the subject learning outcomes for this subject. We had to get this IO up to about 15 minutes, and Trudy worked very closely with us on trying to make sure that 15 minutes was going to work. We're given a 30-minute marking allocation for the assessment. So 30 minutes, 15 minutes. The idea is 15 minutes of conversation and 5 minutes of feedback, which I try to support the markers on this process, including tips and tricks on how to be completing the rubric and, formulate their comments whilst we're going. And then so they can engage in that 5 minutes of feedback to the student, and then 10 minutes to tidy up the rubrics. So if there's an extension to that answer or further questions to that. But yeah, in terms of marking, it's 30-minute marking allocation for a 15-minute submission.
I can see that Marika's got her hand up, and I have a suspicion that it's for you. Following up on this, Marika, did you want to pick up there?
Yep. I was just wondering again, what's the weighting on that 15-minute assessment?
Oh yeah, I popped it in there. Sorry, Marika. It's
oh, sorry, I missed it. I was kept looking.
Fine. It's 40% currently. The assessment schedule is a 30% written, 40% oral, 30% simulation-based assessment.
Cool. Thanks.
Okay, thank you for that. Other questions that we had. We did have lots of requests for examples, etc. Everyone wants to see your rubrics and descriptions of how it went and how it was run, and specifically how the marking process was handled, etc. So I think we will definitely look at finding more examples and potentially templating, Amita, I think in that space. Do you want to talk to what's available in that resource potentially, Amita, in the Teaching Academy Hub while I look at that?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, I wanted to, announce this was the point that, we're really delighted to launch this new resource on interactive oral assessment. There has been a demand for it for a while. It is now available on the Teaching Academy Hub in Brightspace under Assessment Resources and Supervised Assessments. And Lachlan is just sharing. I have put a link in there, but I've realized that if you haven't enrolled in Teaching Academy, you might not be able to see it, but it is really easy to enroll into that. So that resource will take you through the whole process. First of all, what an interactive oral is, what are its benefits, what is the design process. There are examples embedded all through. How are you going to implement it? There is a whole heap of resources there, including a student video that we did with students who have already participated in interactive orals of their experiences, and them sharing some top tips for new students who are going to experience it for the first time. So there's a whole heap of resources, and also how you can do moderation, how you can bring your markers on board. All that has been covered with literature, videos, and examples. So hopefully that should be good, but we are very open to receiving your feedback so that we can keep tailoring it to your requirements.
Thanks, Amita. Look, there's a lot in there. Obviously, I have put the link to the Teaching Academy Hub into the chat, so I'm hoping people are able to join just through that link. If not, I will chase that up and drop it into the chat stream and the follow-up. There'll be an automated email that comes out after the event as well that we can include all that sort of thing in for everyone. So don't stress if you're not able to do it right here and right now. We will follow all of that up following the event. Amita, I'll leave the closing and the wrap up with you at this point, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there anybody want to ask a burning question? We can take one last question before we close. If not, I'm happy to, yeah. Okay, good, no problem. Thanks a lot. So thank you. Thank you, especially our panel members, for their generosity in sharing the valuable insights and helping us deepen our understanding of interactive oral assessments. Your expertise and openness have truly enriched today's discussion. It's been fantastic, and I can see, the level of engagement was amazing as well. And special thanks to all our participants for your enthusiastic participation and thoughtful questions and comments. And like Lachlan said, we'll make sure we get back to you if we haven't answered your question during the session. Your engagement in the session like this is so meaningful and impactful. So thanks a lot. We've already shared the new resource with you, so please feel free to have a look, and I hope you find it valuable. Share your feedback. We're more than happy to, add or, tailor it to your requirements as well. And thank you once again for being part of today's session. We look forward to continuing this conversation together. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Amita.
Thank you.